Hello everyone, my name is Rosie Helson and I'm Marketing Manager at Natural Capital Partners. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us today to hear about the rise of the green gas market and how businesses are taking advantage of this new opportunity to address their Scope 1 emissions. So this webinar is actually pretty popular. We've had quite a good sign-up rate today. And I'd say 95% of the registrants to this webinar are from businesses, many of which are household name businesses. So we've got big four accounting firms, management consultancies, FMCG brands, technology companies, pharmaceuticals, supermarkets, you name it. So it's really encouraging to see that so many of you are interested to hear about the green gas market and the opportunities it presents. So we have three speakers today. Oliver Crouch is our Chief Product Officer based here in London, and he leads the development of products and services to meet our clients' requirements. Ollie has over 15 years experience working in the energy and carbon markets and has particular expertise in generating solutions for companies with global operations and impacts. Second in the running is Jessie Scharf, who is the scheme manager at the Green Gas Certification Scheme, which is, for those that don't already know, a biomethane registry covering 75% of the UK market. So Jessie works with the scheme's 50+ members to develop the green gas market in the UK and represents the GGCS within the European Renewable Gas Registries Group as well. Finally, last but not least, we'll have Siva Niranjan present. So Siva is Head of Environmental Sustainability at Sopra Steria Group. And Siva is responsible for its environmental sustainability strategy and performance in relation to both internal and external stakeholders. Siva is a chartered engineer by background and graduate in civil, structural and environmental engineering from UCL. So this is actually a very rare occurrence because our presenters from webinars are normally reporting in from various parts of the world. But today we have everyone all in one room here in London. And at the request of my colleague, we have actually posted a selfie of us in action running this webinar. So feel free to take a look at our Twitter account, which is also on the screen now. So back to logistics. The webinar is scheduled to last 45 minutes and we'll leave around 10 minutes at the end for questions. You are all muted in listen-only mode, so please use the panel on the right-hand side of the screen to submit any questions and we'll go through them at the end. So before we begin, we'd just like to run a quick audience poll to find out what stage our audience members are at in relation to green gas. So you should shortly see a poll on the screen now. And the question is, what do you see as the biggest barrier to your company sourcing green gas? So you can select one from the list. No barriers, we're already sourcing it to address Scope 1. Perhaps location is a barrier to sourcing green gas. Perhaps cost is the main issue why you haven't sourced green gas. Or perhaps you're not sure and that's the reason you're here today, because you'd like to find out more. So I'll just give you a few more minutes to respond to that. And okay, we'll close the poll now and hopefully we'll be able to see the results. Okay, interesting. So it's a fairly even spread actually. So no barriers, perhaps location is the main issue, perhaps cost is an issue, or not sure. So you've joined to find out more. Okay, that is interesting. Well, hopefully we'll speak to all of those barriers and you will find out more about this, this market in the next presentations. So I'm now very pleased to hand over to Ollie, who will give us an overview of the green gas market, including examples of companies which are already sourcing green gas. So over to you, Ollie.
Thank you very much, Rosie, and great to see so many of you marking on the poll that you're already sourcing green gas. So Natural Capital Partners' origins go back to the 1990s when we launched as Future Forests, offering individuals the opportunity to compensate their GHG emissions by planting UK forests. We transformed to the carbon neutral company in 2006, by which time we were working with internationally, primarily with businesses using market-based instruments to reach their GHG reduction targets. Through that work, we observed businesses embracing market-based instruments to deliver their targets. The infrastructure and methodologies of the carbon market have evolved to evidence progress towards the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, and the standards continue to evolve to develop new instruments denominated in units relevant to water, health, gender, and biodiversity. The second major theme on our journey has been facilitated by the GHG reporting frameworks, primarily the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, who encouraged businesses to address their electricity emissions with market-based instruments. Energy attribute certificates is the term of the category that covers these instruments, and it includes renewable energy certificates in North America, guarantees of origin in Europe, and IREX internationally. Importantly, these instruments allow the owner to make a renewable energy claim. Our transformation into natural capital partners reflects this broader product portfolio, and we aspire to be a single source provider of global instruments made simple. Green gas certificates recently became part of our portfolio. Green gas, also known as biomethane, is a solution for businesses to manage the GHG emissions associated with their natural gas consumption, and that's a Scope 1 emission. A green gas certificate allows you to manage your Scope 1 emissions the same way that a REC allows you to manage your Scope 2 emissions. But what is biomethane, and what role will it play in our future energy mix? Well, biomethane comes from biogas, and that's produced by the breakdown of organic matter. Feedstocks include biodegradable materials such as manure, sewage, food waste, and plant material. To make a comparison with the electricity markets, these feedstocks are the equivalent of renewable energy technologies like solar, wind, and hydro. And as the green gas market matures, we're starting to see a differentiation between these feedstocks in terms of the price of the underlying certificate. Before biogas can be introduced to a gas grid, it needs to be upgraded to pipeline standards, and that involves drying the gas and removing some of the corrosive elements to protect the pipes. And through that process, it becomes biomethane. Now, injecting biomethane into the grid allows the energy from the biomethane to be used in areas located away from where the energy is generated. By issuing certificates that embody the renewable attributes of the biomethane, you create the product that as a gas consumer on the grid, you need in order to make a renewable gas claim. As you can see from the chart, which is a forecast for Europe, biomethane in the green there is expected to grow substantially up to about 10% of natural gas consumption by 2030. So a fantastic growth path for this sector. Now that growth will be driven primarily by production incentives, which are the equivalent of feed-in tariffs, but importantly, corporates can play a role in this transition by demanding renewable gas and sourcing green gas certificates. So what did the GHG reporting frameworks have to say about green gas? Now, I've already described how instrumental the GHG protocol was in developing corporate demand for renewable electricity. And fortunately, when they published their Scope 2 guidance, they had the foresight to contemplate the application of that market-based reporting approach to green gas markets. And that's really been fundamental and transformational for this emerging market, because you've got the standard bearer for the corporate market saying that their market-based guidance holds true for green gas, providing that those green gas instruments meet the Scope 2 quality criteria, which relate to aspects such as avoiding double counting, ensuring unique claims, and so forth. Now, the green ticks that you see on the screen are a clear simplification. And if you have the appetite for the detail, I'd encourage you to read the Green Gas Appendix of the 2018 Carbon Neutral Protocol, where we've summarized how the application of these green gas certificates plays out in a corporate GHG inventory. As a taster, the nuance relates to how the biogenic emissions of green gas get accounted for, but I'll leave it at that. Encouragingly, the CDP took a very pragmatic approach in their 2017 guidance by recommending businesses report 0 Scope 1 emissions when a green gas instrument meets the Scope 2 quality criteria. So some really helpful, clear, and simple advice there from CDP. So who are the organisations behind these green gas instruments? In the UK, there are two schemes, and it's the Green Gas Certification Scheme that has grown to certify approximately 75% of the biomethane that's injected into the UK grid. And you'll shortly be hearing from Jesse. It's important to note that high quality standards play a fundamental role in emerging instrument markets. We've worked with many standards over the years, and to be successful, standards need to be well governed, transparent, and stakeholder driven, so that they are open and responsive to the needs of the market. We think that's critical. And a standard, along with its members, needs to advocate for their emerging market by engaging with the likes of CDP and RE100 and having the conversations that move the market forward. Natural Capital Partners observes many of those qualities within the Green Gas Certification Scheme, and we think they've been instrumental in establishing and growing the market in the UK. With my final slide, I'm going to explore the international use of green gas certificates. Jesse, I know, is going to touch on the pan-European developments, so I'll set the scene by considering the UK. Now, the UK is part of a harmonised EU energy market, and from the Scope 2 guidance, we know that that single market sets a market boundary for electricity tracking instruments. We see with electricity guarantees of origin that they're freely traded across Europe, and that fungibility and large addressable market has made the geo market very efficient. It allows businesses like yourselves to access a wide spectrum of qualities and prices, and as a result, the geo market has grown rapidly. And it's now, interestingly, about 10 times the size of the voluntary market in North America, which I think is always an interesting reference. The European gas grid is very interconnected. The UK, for example, as you can see on this slide, has interconnections to Ireland, Belgium, and the Netherlands, which allow for the bidirectional flow of gas, so the import and the export of gas, meaning that gas consumption in these three markets can be credibly addressed with a green gas certificate from the UK. And we believe this international application of green gas certificates will continue, and that it will evolve in line with what we see in the electricity markets. So in summary, I'd say that Natural Capital Partners is focused on making it simple for businesses to embrace these market-based instruments, that we're privileged to work with leading standards and the early adopters like Sopra Steria to move these markets forward. And when we're successful, we create the opportunity for everyone to play their part in the transition to renewable energy. And I'd encourage you all, that right now is a great time to embrace green gas into your plans.
Thank you for that overview of the market, Ollie. So we've had some questions come in already, which we'll go through at the end. So please do keep them coming in using the panel on the right-hand side. For now, I will hand over to Jesse, who will dive a bit deeper into the process of sourcing green gas and the outlook for the market in Europe.
Thanks very much, Rosie, and thanks for the kind introduction as well, Ollie. My name is Jesse. I'm the scheme manager for the Green Gas Certification Scheme. Over the next few slides, I'll take a deeper look into our scheme and touch on some of the points that Ollie's brought up. So, Green Gas Certification Scheme, we are a biomethane registry. We issue renewable gas guarantees of origin, and Ollie's already described what kind of category they are. They're a contractual instrument or an energy attribute certificate, very similar to a REGO or a GEO. And I've just put a little table there where you can see what each one looks like. It's a unique identifier for each kilowatt of green gas that goes into the grid. And I've also included a link on this slide just for you to follow up and have a look on our website if you want to get really into the detail of what is a biomethane registry and a unique identifier. So our scheme to date, we were established in 2011 by the biomethane industry through the Renewable Energy Association, who we're a part of. You can see there some of the names of our founder members. Essentially, in the electricity market in the UK, the government established the registry for renewable electricity. However, there was no provision in the renewable heat incentive, which is the support mechanism for renewable heat and biomethane. There was no provision to establish a registry for gas. Therefore, the industry did so themselves. So we've been going 5-6 years now. We're led by our members. We hold biannual oversight panel meetings, and those are open to our members, our producers and suppliers such as Natural Capital Partners, but also any green gas consumers who want to come along and find out more about the market. I'd be more than welcome to attend, and our next meeting is in Birmingham on the 28th of March for anybody local. As Ollie's mentioned, we represent about 75% of the UK biomethane market. Almost all major UK gas suppliers are members of the scheme, as well as consultants such as Natural Capital Partners. So we've worked really, really hard to develop the market from nothing in 2011. A key point of that was our report that we commissioned from Ecofis, which showed that our GGOs meet the quality criteria of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. And I'd recommend clicking through and having a little look at the summary of that report, as well as the documents that Ollie highlighted. Here's a graph that gives you a very brief overview of the market, how the market's developed to date. And to take you through it, you can see that in the early years, there was relatively little activity with not a lot of green gas being produced. Then in 2015 and 2016, a lot of plants were built in the UK because of the support mechanism. And that 2017 number will increase as time goes on and more gas gets registered with us. You can see the blue chart, the blue line indicates the amount of green gas purchased by consumers, again from a low base. Last year was the year the market really picked up based on that Greenhouse Gas Protocol and the quality criteria within. So moving on a little bit to look at our connections to the European gas grid. Ollie's already given you a map of how we're connected to our immediate neighbours. I've put a link in there of how Europe as a whole is connected, including how gas flows between interconnectors over any given month. Concept is that the gas grid is a single logistical facility, and that green gas injected in one part of it can be withdrawn from the other, as long as there's a reasonable view that gas could have flowed in that direction. That concept is widely recognised by our partners in other countries, such as the Netherlands and Germany. It's also recognised by the UK government via the Renewable Transport Fuel Obligation. So with that in mind, companies or gas consumers outside the UK are welcome and have the ability to buy green gas certificates from our system directly, receive the green gas certificate in English if you like. However, and that accounts for about 20% of the sales we saw last year. However, we're very aware that consumers in the Netherlands, Germany and elsewhere would like to receive a certificate issued out of their home registry. And we've been working on that through the European Renewable Gas Registries grouping. So that is ERGAR, the European Renewable Gas Registry. The members of the group are UK, Germany, Denmark, Austria, France, Switzerland and Switzerland. Finland also has an operating biomethane registry, however it's not connected to the European gas network as such, but we hope it will be in the future. There are plans to build a pipe. The proposal within the Renewable Energy Directive 2 is that all member states will establish a registry for renewable gas, and already seeing countries such as Ireland and Italy ahead of the curve on that, putting the wheels in motion to get registries up and running. And I know that in other countries such as Poland and Spain, Sweden are making significant progress. So ERGAR, it's a grouping of the registries. The aim is to create a common standard for transferring guarantees of origin between our registries, and also to have that as an automated system which has low transaction costs. There are currently methods for transferring guarantees of origin between registries. Denmark, Germany and Austria have a cooperation agreement, and there's an informal agreement between the UK and the Dana registry in Germany. However, all those current agreements are quite clunky and quite time consuming. And we want to move as quickly as possible to an automated system with a common standard. We hope that that will be up and running in the summer of 2018, perhaps Q3. and we'll be keeping everybody updated as things progress. I've got one more slide to talk a bit about biomethane beyond. Ollie's already told you or shown you how some projections for the amount of biomethane that may come onto the market Europe-wide. To put that into a look at that just in the UK, we had about 2.5 terawatt hours of green gas biomethane produced last year. That's from out of a total of 800 terawatt hours of gas consumption. So it's a significant amount of green gas. It's still quite small compared to the total market. If you look at some of the predictions for how much green gas, which is not biomethane, which could be bio-SNG, which is the gasification of biomass that cannot be processed in an anaerobic digestion, by anaerobic digestion, we could be looking at 130 terawatt hours a year of green gas. And that's in the context of looking at a falling gas demand as we have efficiency improvements and less gas going to power generation. I've also put a note in there about power to gas. So that's about creating hydrogen from electrolysis using renewable electricity. Now you can either inject that into the grid as hydrogen or combine it with CO2 to create methane. And the potential for that market is really defined by how you see the continued cost curve for renewables and whether there'll be a lot of surplus renewables available to produce that hydrogen. So to very quickly sum up, it's a rapidly growing market with a lot more potential, and yeah, I can advise you to take a closer look and yeah, hand you over to the next speaker.
Thank you very much, Jesse. That offers some great insight into the development of the market. So there are some links in Jesse's presentation, and we'll happily share those when we send around the recording of this webinar later this week or possibly next week. So for now, I'll hand over to Siva, who will share the details of Sopra Steria Group's decision to source green gas and how that fits into the company's overall sustainability strategy.
Thank you, Rosie. It's my pleasure to join you all on the webinar. I first want to introduce Sopra Steria Group and then share with you our approach to sustainability, i.e. the bigger picture, and then explain how energy consumption and the related emissions fit into that rationale. And then finally zoom on to our current collaboration with natural capital partners on green gas. Sopra Steria is a European leader in digital transformation. We provide a comprehensive portfolio of end-to-end service offerings relating to consulting, system integration, software development, infrastructure management, and business process services. Our clients include private and public sector organizations. We deliver some transformation programs that address some of their complex and critical business challenges by the best use of digital technology. Sopra Steria has over 41,000 employees in more than 20 countries. Last year's revenue being 3.84 billion euros, and we are listed in the Paris Euronext exchange. Over the past years, Sopra Steria has woven into the fabric of its organization the core principles of sustainability. In other words, it's simply become a business as usual activity, just like quality or good project management. Why? Because it really makes sense, both at a commercial level and also at an individual level to all our stakeholders, whether it be our employees. After all, being a services company, they are our real asset. Our clients, shareholders, partners, including supply chain, and the community around us. It simply is the right thing to do. So, how do we embed principles of sustainability? No real secret here. We follow the classic social, economic, and environmental aspects of best practice. That's the graphic on the left-hand side of the slide. As a company in digital services arena, Our environmental impact is, which is shown on the right-hand side of the slide. One is in our travel of our consultants, i.e. business travel. Two, energy consumed in our offices and data centers, both in-house and with third-party companies. Three, and to a lesser extent, but nevertheless important, waste, primarily electronic waste. And four, our supply chain. And finally, five, the scarce resource, water. We focus on these aspects by embracing best practices and transforming our thinking and the culture of our employees through our sustainability champions, our ambassadors for change. We then take to our clients the value gained from the sound principles of sustainability embedded in our services and solutions to support them into move to a low carbon economy. Now let's drill into the energy part. Energy emissions come second to Sopra Steria Group to business travel emissions in quantity. So the focus on it began a few years ago, looking at electricity consumption, which is the largest element by far in our offices and data centers. We also use gas and district heating to keep our offices warm, and oil mainly in our generators as backup power for data centers where we require a 24/7 by 365 operations. For electricity, where possible, and what I mean by this is where we have operational control of a building, a move to a renewable energy. But in cases where we share a building, say for example, we occupy a floor or two, it's much harder, in some cases near impossible. As a parallel activity, we also embarked on several energy efficiency drives. These included the usual things, moving to LED, installing motion sensors, switching off non-essential equipment outside office hours, and more importantly, a gradual cultural change among our colleagues to think about the resources we use and play a part in combating climate change and protecting our environment. By the way, most of these activities also add to our company's bottom line. 4 years ago, our Scope 1 and Scope 2 split was something like 1:6. So focusing on electricity as part of Scope 2 made sense. By the way, we also focused on electricity in our off-site data centers run by third-party companies. Our Scope 3 made sense too. Both parts, I should say, were our low-hanging fruits. So having done all of these and having reduced Scope 2 by almost half, suddenly we found the Scope 1 to 2 ratio from 1:6 turned out to be 1:3 now, bringing Scope 1, i.e. oil and gas in our case, into focus. So we explored what is it that we can realistically do to reduce emissions and move to a low carbon solution. Sopra Steria over the years worked with natural capital partners on several initiatives, including first market programs such as carbon neutral data centers and Power Plus, a precursor to IREX in India. So when natural capital partners brought to our attention the green gas scheme in the UK, we listened, we learned, we argued a bit, we discussed a bit, and then just simply snapped it up as one of the first companies to do so. We are currently undergoing our 2017 audit with our statutory auditors, and the early indications are that we are likely to reduce our gas emissions by over 25% for the whole group due to the green gas certification scheme. A very good outcome indeed. Looking into the future, listening to Ollie and Jesse there, we plan to consider green gas beyond the UK to further reduce our gas emissions. Finally, I just want to close by sharing with you the wider benefits that we have realized through running an organization sustainably, with a whole series of initiatives ranging from business travel, leveraging technology to lower carbon modes of travel, for energy efficiency programs, to the use of renewable energy in our offices and data centers. These have all resulted in not just external recognition from analyst or benchmark organizations, but more importantly, added to the sense of belonging and pride of our employees to work at Sopra Steria Group. And this adds to the culture of creativity, innovation, and passion that is drawn into our engagements with clients. Long may it continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Siva. That was a very clear and actually colourful and visual explanation of how green gas fits into Sopra Steria's renewable energy goals. So we've had our 3 presentations and it's almost time to begin an audience Q&A. We've had a few questions come in, but we'd like to firstly run our second and final audience poll. So you should see that appearing on the screen. The question is, how will green gas feature in your 2019 sustainability plan? And we don't assume that it will do, because the first answer is not at all as an option. Perhaps actually it will feature and you're thinking about it and considering it and watching this webinar as part of that consideration. Or finally, you know, you're either already sourcing it or you have decided that this is something you want to do. So I think we'll just give you a couple more seconds to give a few more answers, and we'll close the poll now and should be able to show the results. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so vast majority are interested in green gas, considering it, and perhaps that is why you have joined the webinar today. And good to know that 24%, I said 25% because I was rounding up optimistically, we will buy it. So that is also good news. Okay, so now we will move on to the Q&A. So I will just choose the first question. I think this one is probably best directed at Jesse, actually. So someone anonymous asks, how widespread is green gas use and which types of companies and sectors? I presume that means are using green gas at the moment.
Yeah.
Have you unmuted it?
I think probably saw on the slide that last year was the year that the sector really grew. Before that, we'd seen some early adopters. Sainsbury's was the sort of most high profile, been reporting their green gas for a couple of years. What we saw last year is that expanded, and we saw cinema chains, we saw property companies like Landsec, we've seen IT companies like Sopra. We've got SMEs signing up to green gas tariffs, over 250 households on green gas tariffs. So I think at the end of last year we had around approximately 60 different green gas consumers of a variety of scale. And yeah, in the first month or 2 months of the year, we're seeing other companies join the sector.
Thanks for that, Jesse. So we've had a question come in specifically directed at Ollie, actually. It's a very simple one. What are the drivers of price?
Thank you, Rosie. So, I mean, I share a bit of a perspective on this, and then maybe Jesse, you could share some thoughts as well. But what we see is that it's really, as I mentioned, sort of in the slides, that the feedstock type has a big influence, or probably has the largest influence on price. And I talked about those feedstocks being, you know, comparable to the technologies from a renewable electricity perspective, and certainly it's the sort of pure waste feedstocks that attract the more premium pricing. I can't give you, you know, a specific differential, you know, but certainly most of the requests that we see, most consumers would have a preference for, you know, something that would generally be a waste stream had it not been, you used to generate green gas versus something like, an energy crop, where you potentially get into that debate about what's the best application for this, this particular energy crop. And then obviously, things like the vintage, the age of the certificate. It was interesting to see Jesse's slide that 2017 looked like it was the first year when supply and demand were pretty much in balance. Sort of up until now, there's been a bit of an overhang of supply, and obviously the older certificates, tend to trade at a bit of a discount to the current vintage. But certainly it looks like the market is now fairly well balanced going forward. So that sort of differential, I imagine, would disappear.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ollie. I have a question for Siva from another company, who is obviously grateful and benefiting from hearing your view from a company perspective. How did you convince or get agreement from your senior management to embrace the green gas scheme?
Thanks, Rosie. Interesting question. How many hours is this webinar? I think the biggest challenge for us was primarily at the outset, where how we needed to demonstrate how it fitted into the wider strategy of our corporate responsibility sustainability goal, which supports in turn the business as usual activities of our company. So the initial challenge was to inform our employees, our colleagues, and our middle management and our senior management to try and navigate through what is it that our company needed to do, and to get the bigger picture signed off. And last year, we had an achievement in that we were one of the first 50 companies to get the science-based target approved, which is a target which goes into 2025 through to 2040. So once an organization's senior management acknowledges that combating climate change is vital for the long-term welfare of all of its employees, its shareholders, and its clients, then it becomes a lot easier. So therefore, as I said in my presentation, we started with renewable energy for electricity. And then while we have plucked all the low-hanging fruits, then it was a challenge for us to see how can we reduce our scope 1. And at that stage, I must say, perhaps I shouldn't say this too loudly, but it was a very easy sell, because it really, this piece of the jigsaw fitted in very well with the overarching strategy for the company of making sure that we had satisfied stakeholders, and it fitted in perfectly.
Wonderful. And I know Sopra Steria is certainly not shy of setting quite challenging climate action targets. So that's great that you've managed to source green gas as well. So we've had another question come in, and I'm not sure whether to direct this at Jesse or Ollie. So perhaps you guys can give me a head nod or an indication as to which one of you would like to address this. Are RGGOs recognised by DEFRA as eligible for their mandatory requirement for companies to report market or location emissions in annual reports?
Unfortunately, the short answer is no. We did have quite a long dialogue with them in 2012 and 2013. They were warm, positive to making some changes, and then went completely quiet, and we couldn't get anything out of them at all. At which point we then decided to focus on the greenhouse gas protocol and making sure that protocol was recognising our GGOs. That was quite successful, but we do need to go back to DEFRA and try and get more out of them. It's yes, a sort of we'd like that to happen, and we're working on it at the moment.
Thanks very much, Jesse. So this next question is related to CDP criteria and reporting. It says, although CDP states that if it meets the Scope 2 market-based quality criteria, then it can be declared as zero emissions for Scope 1. In reality, this would surely depend on feed source, injected energy to make the biomethane. Do we think this will be revised as green gas becomes more mature with more explicit Scope 1 guidance related to it? So I guess, would that be Ollie or? Yep, okay, over to Ollie.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and as I mentioned in the slides, it is a little complex. And we try and sort of summarize sort of what the different reporting frameworks are saying in that annex that I referenced to the carbon neutral protocol. But in essence, the GHG protocol Scope 2 guidance said you can report effectively a 0 Scope 1 emission, but you do need to account for the biogenic emissions relating to that green gas, i.e. the organic content. Now that actually gets reported outside of the 3 scopes that you'll be familiar with from the corporate standard, i.e. Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. So, and the requirement is that you report that separate to your GHG corporate inventory. So a kind of footnote to the corporate accounts, if you like, that references biogenic carbon, which, you know, if you were a company that happened to own a forest, for example, is where you would report sequestration of carbon from that forest. So it's separate to those 3 scopes. I think it could definitely be clearer in the CDP guidance, and hopefully, given that the CDP revises that guidance each year, that may become a little clearer. But maybe Jesse, I'd sort of welcome your thoughts on that question.
To add to that, Ollie, yeah, you should report the carbon emissions as under an off-scope note about their biogenic. I think in the question getting at the energy that goes into the biomethane production process, that should be reported under Scope 3. And for companies that are taking a close interest in Scope 3 emissions, you can be selective in the market. For example, if you're buying your certificates from a food waste plant, they will have much lower Scope 3 emissions associated with them than someone who's using energy crop, because food waste is deemed at 0, whereas energy crop you have to account for fertilizer use, tractor movements, etc.
Wonderful, thanks, Jesse. We've got another question come in for Siva. What would you say is or has been your single biggest challenge? I'm guessing that's related to green gas sourcing rather than anything else.
I think this also relates to the original question which was asked. Our challenge specifically for green gas was, first of all, for our company, our sustainability practice to understand what it really, because it was the first time that it was introduced, when it was introduced by natural capital partners. So we had to have several sessions ourselves to understand and appreciate fully what it was, in order for us to be able to take it through our sustainability champions, our ambassadors for change in our company, to discuss it and then propose it as part of a solution to our overall commitment to reduce greenhouse emissions for our Scope 1 and Scope 2, and our selected Scope 3s, which were, like, for example, offsite data centers and business travel. So it was more for us to come up to speed as a technology services company. It's not our forte to understand, like Jesse or Ollie, what it is. So we had to be helped, and that's why we see in natural capital partners a trusted partner who was able to come and explain to us and help us. And having had the track record of working with them in the coining of the carbon neutral data center and the Power Plus in India, meant that this was another of the 3 things that we have done in 3 consecutive years. So it's really the key challenge for us in this context was understanding what it did and the benefits.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Siva. So we're coming to the end of the webinar time. We do have a few unanswered questions, but we can respond to those separately and directly after this webinar. And if you do have any further questions for any of our 3 presenters, their email addresses are on the screen now. So I'd like to thank you all for attending once again, and also thank you to the speakers for their presentations. The webinar recording will be available on our website. It'll go on YouTube and our website, and we'll also send it out to you via email. Please feel free to share that link with your colleagues and contacts. So thank you and goodbye.